The first thing my mother-in-law did after my husband's funeral wasn't cry. It wasn't hug me. It wasn't even say his name. She rang my doorbell, stepped inside, pulled a measuring tape from her purse, and started measuring my living room walls like she was pricing them for sale. Then she handed me a legal notice and said calmly, "I'm here to collect what my son left behind." Her eyes slid past me to my 4-year-old coloring on the floor. A pause. A faint frown. "Not her," she added. "I don't want the child." I should have screamed, should have slammed the door, should have thrown her out. But I didn't. Because 3 months before he died, my husband left me something she didn't know existed. And the second she walked in with that measuring tape, I realized something terrifying. She thought she came to take everything. She had no idea she was walking straight into a trap. My name is Elena Ward. I'm 31 years old, and 11 days after my husband died, I learned that grief isn't the worst thing a person can feel. Anticipation is. Because grief is heavy but predictable, while anticipation sits quietly in your chest and waits for something bad to prove it right. That afternoon, the light coming through the windows looked dull and tired, like the day itself didn't want to be there. And my daughter was on the floor drawing dinosaurs with purple teeth, humming to herself in that soft, absent-minded way kids do when the world still feels safe. The doorbell rang once, sharp and flat, and I remember thinking it sounded impatient, which is a strange thing to notice unless some part of you already knows who's standing outside. I opened the door, and there she was, Darlene, posture straight, expression smooth, dressed in black so crisp it looked ironed onto her body. And behind her stood Tyler, my husband's younger brother, holding a metal measuring tape like he'd brought tools to a job. She didn't say hello, didn't offer condolences, didn't even glance at my face long enough to pretend she cared. She simply stepped past me into the house as if the doorway belonged to her and said, calm as a weather report, that she wouldn't be staying long. Tyler followed and snapped the tape open with a metallic click that echoed down the hallway, and something inside my stomach tightened, because people don't bring measuring tools to sympathy visits. I closed the door slowly and watched them move through my living room, her eyes traveling across the walls, the shelves, the furniture, calculating, while he stretched the tape across the window frame and muttered numbers under his breath like he was inventorying stock. I asked what she was doing, and she turned toward me with the same expression someone might use if you'd interrupted them during paperwork, and said she was handling what Marcus should have organized before he died. Then she handed me an envelope with my name printed neatly across the front. Official, heavy, deliberate. My fingers curled around it, but I didn't open it yet. I just asked what it was, and she said it was a formality, the kind of word people use when they want something huge to sound harmless. Behind her, Tyler measured the bookcase, called out another number, and she nodded faintly like it pleased her. When I asked what the formality was for, she finally looked straight into my eyes and said she was reclaiming what belonged to her family. The house, the firm, the accounts, any assets under her son's name. And the way she said reclaiming made it sound like I was the thief. Then her gaze drifted down to my daughter, sitting cross-legged on the floor, crayons scattered around her knees, and she watched her for a second with a thin, thoughtful look before saying flatly that she didn't want the child. Not angry, not cruel, just dismissive, like she was declining an extra item she hadn't ordered. Something cold slid through my chest, but I didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't beg, because in that exact moment a memory surfaced, quiet and precise. My husband's voice from months earlier, telling me about a locked drawer and a key and instructions I hadn't understood back then, and suddenly the fear she expected to see on my face never arrived. I just nodded once and said I'd review the papers, and that was the moment she made her mistake, because she smiled, satisfied, like she thought she'd already won, and people who think they've already won rarely notice when the game hasn't actually started yet. The door clicked shut behind them, and for a few seconds I just stood there with the envelope in my hand, listening to the silence they left behind, the kind that feels thicker than air, like the house itself is holding its breath. My daughter kept coloring on the floor, completely unaware that a woman had just walked through our home and tried to erase her from it. And when she looked up and asked if dinosaurs missed their friends when they went extinct, I had to swallow twice before answering because my throat suddenly felt too small for my voice. I told her yes, I thought they probably did, and she nodded like that made perfect sense, then went back to drawing, peaceful again, while my hands slowly tightened around the paper Darlene had given me. I didn't open it yet. I already knew what it would say, or at least what she wanted it to say. And the truth was, the document didn't scare me nearly as much as the memory pushing its way back into my mind. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just Marcus sitting behind his desk 3 months earlier, sleeves rolled, tie loose, staring at numbers on his screen like they'd personally offended him. And when I asked what he was doing, he'd said, planning, in that casual tone he used when something mattered more than he wanted to admit. I'd teased him about sounding like an old man preparing a will, and he'd smiled, not amused, just thoughtful, then told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should check the bottom drawer, not the top one, the locked one. And I remember laughing it off because people our age aren't supposed to talk like that unless they're joking or paranoid. But Marcus wasn't paranoid. Marcus was precise. That realization settled into my chest slowly, like a weight finding its place. I grabbed my keys without thinking, told my daughter we were going for a quick drive, and 10 minutes later, I was standing outside his office building, staring at his name still printed on the glass door like nothing in the world had changed. Inside, everything smelled exactly like him. Coffee, paper, that cedar wood aftershave he wore even on Sundays, and the familiarity hit hard enough to make my knees threaten to fold. But I didn't let them because grief can wait and curiosity can't. I walked to his desk, opened the top drawer first out of habit, saw pens and folders and nothing important, then slid my hand down to the bottom one and felt the lock beneath my fingers. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small silver key he'd once handed me with a shrug and the words, "for something boring." And I remember thinking how strange it was that something supposedly boring suddenly felt like the loudest object in the room. The key slid in smoothly. I turned it. The click sounded sharper than Tyler's measuring tape had. Inside the drawer sat a single large envelope with my name written across the front in Marcus's handwriting, not printed, not formal, just written the way he used to label leftovers in the fridge. And my pulse started counting slower, heavier beats as I picked it up and opened it. Papers, several of them. The first page was legal language, the second was numbers, the third made me stop breathing. I read it again, slower this time, then leaned back in his chair and let out one quiet breath as something steady and certain spread through my chest. Not relief, not happiness, something stronger than both. Understanding. Because suddenly, Darlene's confidence made perfect sense. She thought she was about to inherit a fortune. She had no idea she was racing to claim something else entirely. Something Marcus had prepared. Something airtight. And as I sat there holding those documents, one thought settled in my mind with absolute clarity. I wasn't going to fight her for anything. I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. And that was the moment I almost felt sorry for her. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and paper dust, the kind of scent that clings to places where decisions get made, and nobody walks out exactly the same as they walked in. And I was already seated when Darlene answered with the quiet confidence of someone arriving to collect a prize she believed had her name engraved on it. She wore pearl earrings, black heels, and that same calm expression she'd had in my living room, the look of a woman who didn't rush because she'd never needed to. Tyler stepped in behind her carrying a leather folder against his chest like it contained gold bars, and her attorney followed last, cautious eyes scanning the table, the documents, me. She didn't greet me. She didn't look surprised to see me composed. She just sat down, folded her hands, and said she hoped we could keep things efficient. My lawyer slid the contract across the table, neat stack, clean edges, everything precise, and explained in an even voice that all listed assets and liabilities would transfer fully upon signature, standard language, legally binding, irreversible once executed. Darlene nodded once, barely listening, already reaching for the pen, and her attorney shifted slightly beside her like he wanted to interrupt but didn't dare. Because people like Darlene don't hire advisors to question them, they hire them to witness their decisions. She skimmed the first page, flipped the second, didn't read the third at all, and I watched her eyes move the way shoppers glance at price tags when they've already decided they're buying. My lawyer asked if she wanted time to review the financial schedules in detail, and Darlene gave a faint smile that didn't touch her eyes and said she trusted her judgment. That was the moment I knew Marcus had predicted her perfectly, not just her greed, but her certainty, because certainty is what traps work. The pen touched paper. The sound was soft, almost polite. She signed once, turned the page, signed again, quick, precise strokes, the rhythm of someone autographing souvenirs. And with each signature, Tyler's shoulders seemed to lift higher, like he could already feel the weight of ownership settling onto them. Halfway through, her attorney finally leaned closer and murmured that she might want to verify the outstanding obligations listed in Appendix C, and she lifted 2 fingers without looking at him, a silent command, and he stopped speaking instantly. She finished the last page, capped the pen, and slid the stack toward me with a small, satisfied smile that said she thought this was the part where I realized I'd lost. I picked up the pen slowly, not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted to feel the moment fully. Every line Marcus had arranged, every clause he'd hidden like pieces on a chessboard, every consequence she just accepted without seeing. Then I signed. One stroke, calm, final. Chairs shifted, paper shuffled, the contract was collected, and just like that, it was done. Darlene leaned back slightly, studying me with mild curiosity now, as if she couldn't quite understand why I didn't look defeated, and she said she hoped this would teach me independence, her tone polite but edged with quiet satisfaction. I met her gaze and told her I was sure it would. She nodded once, pleased, already turning her attention to her attorney to discuss transferring account access, and I stood, picked up my bag, and walked to the door without anyone stopping me, because to them, the story had just ended with her victory. But the truth was, the story had ended 3 months earlier, the night Marcus locked a drawer and handed me a key. Because traps don't close when they're built. They close when someone steps inside. Some people inherit money. Some have inherent consequences. Subscribe if you choose consequences too.